Episode 2 of the Nutrition Fat Loss series. This is all about calories or energy balance, however you want to say it. Basically calories. Calories in versus calories out. The biggest, the dominant factor in your results. At the end of the day, calories are the base of the pyramid. Again, we're going to use the pyramid made famous by Eric Helms of 3DMJ. It is something that is integrated in our coaching. It's something that's integrated in a lot of smart coaches coaching. It's something that created a system and an order of importance that we need to follow when we want to change our body composition or change performance. Therefore, we're going to be referring to it quite a bit. So once again, I want to shout out Eric Helms, the 3DMJ guys, the Muscle and Strength Pyramids, which is the book that he created. But at the base of the pyramid, we already talked about adherence in episode 2 or episode 1. If you haven't seen episode 1 or listened to episode 1 on the podcast, click the link in the description. You can go visit that and listen or watch that one. It's the base, it's the foundation. It's something that you need to understand before we even get into any of the cool stuff. After that comes calories. This makes the base of the pyramid, and there's a lot of arguments here. Why do calories come before micronutrients? Why do macros come before micronutrients? Aren't micronutrients the vitamins and minerals we need as human beings to thrive and be healthy? The answer is yes. We do need those vitamins and minerals. The reason they come second is for a few reasons. Number one is because the pyramid of importance is based on the idea that we are trying to change the level of body fat or muscle on our body or the performance we see in the gym. Meaning, our pyramid is structured to enhance our body composition or our performance. Therefore, calories come first because at the end of the day, you can eat damn near whatever you want if it's in your calories, and you can still see body composition changes. On top of that, the second bullet I listed here, health improvements and disease risks, health risks, so on and so forth, blood work in general, is actually going to be more influenced by body fat accumulation versus the vitamins and minerals we're intaking. So yes, food quality matters. Yes, micronutrients matter, and we're going to touch on that in episode 4, I believe, of this series. But I don't care how clean you eat, how many vitamins and minerals you take or are consuming through food. If you are eating too many calories, if you're not exercising, and or you are gaining excess body fat, you will have more poor health and you'll have more health risks, disease risks, and your blood work will be disadvantageous. It will be bad. There's been a lot of studies that show people who literally eat Twinkies every day. There's literally the Twinkie study, eats Twinkies every day, or the McDonald's study. They ate McDonald's every day, but they remained in a caloric deficit, they lost body fat, and their health improved. Therefore, calories are at the base of the pyramid because they are the biggest influence on body composition, performance, and health improvements while avoiding health risks. So, that being said, that's the groundwork. We need to set this before we set the rest. Adding to that, we can't even set macros without a caloric intake. Our macros make up our calories. The next video is going to be all about macros, and we're going to dive into that. But this one's about calories. When we want to influence our body composition change, there's 2 equations of energy balance that we need to understand. Calories in versus calories out is the equation, and we need to decide which end of the spectrum of this kind of toggle for this energy balance that we need to fit into to get from point A to point B. Point B being our exact result that we're chasing. So if our goal is fat loss, which most people watching this video is, since it is the Nutrition Fat Loss series, if your goal is fat loss, you need to be on the end of that energy balance equation that is producing more calories out than in. What that means is we're literally in a caloric deficit. We're consuming less calories than we are burning. In order to do that, we need to understand how many calories we're burning on a daily basis, and we need to set the amount of calories we're taking in on a daily basis. There's a few ways we can do this. The first step in understanding where our calories need to be is finding our maintenance caloric intake. Maintenance calories are literally the calories we need in order to maintain our weight. This is something that is not very sexy and not that many people want to pay attention to because who wants to stay the same? We want to progress. We want to see results. But I'd have you consider that maintenance is just as important as progressing, losing fat, building muscle, so on and so forth. Without understanding our maintenance calories or our maintenance body weight, what it takes to A, keep our body weight the same, and B, what our maintenance body weight actually is. Where does our body like to sit at? Where is our settling point for our body weight and our body fat? Without knowing those things, we actually can't set ourselves up for success in any direction we want to take this. So if we want to build muscle or burn fat, you cannot determine how to get there without understanding your maintenance calories. Adding to that, something that we heavily emphasize inside of our coaching and something that we're going to touch very greatly on in episode either 7 or 8, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's the periodization factor. We really educate our clients on periodization because we need to integrate maintenance phases across the week, month, and year, depending on our timeline with the client, in order to facilitate almost like an insurance policy for our metabolism and our hormones. Without these maintenance blocks inside of our intake over the course of the week, month, year, we will not be able to sustain hormonal function and metabolism. We all know the crash diets that we dive into, we lose a bunch of weight really quick, see the results successfully in the mirror, yet we're eating barely anything, our metabolism gets very sluggish, we're burning less calories on a daily basis because our NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so just walking, standing, fidgeting, talking, slows down. Our total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, slows down greatly with our metabolism during these crash diets. So we might look great in the mirror, but we can't maintain hormonal function, metabolism along that process. Therefore, we can't maintain muscle mass during that progress or strength in the gym. What that ultimately leads to is lack of sustainability, which is again why we educate our clients on this entire process. We teach them how to periodize this. How are we going to look at this in the long term? What is your maintenance calories, and how often do we need to put you back to your maintenance calories in order for you to kind of have this safety net or this insurance policy on your hormones, your metabolism, and your muscle mass? And that could look like weekly refeeds. It could look like monthly diet breaks, quarterly diet breaks, however we set it up for the individuals dependent on adherence, which we already touched on, and individualization. What does that client want? What is their goal? But we can't determine any of that with maintenance. Now, if periodization confuses you, if you listen to the word periodization, you hear all these fancy terms, and you either A, get confused, overwhelmed, stressed, or anything like that, I highly encourage you to either A, check out any of our content on nutritional periodization that we've already published, B, wait for episode 7 or 8, which I know you will because we're going to talk about that, or C, click the link in the description, apply for coaching, get the free call, and let us educate you personally on how to do this so you can see success with your fat loss. Now, how do we find maintenance? We understand that calories are the most important determining factor for changing our body composition and improving performance because it's literally energy. So we need to create that energy balance that favors the body composition we want, and we need to fuel our body to get the performance we want. We also know that if we are in a caloric surplus and we gain too much weight, our health improvements decline, health risks incline. So if we want to have better health, just as if not more important than vitamins and minerals and clean foods, we need to make sure our calories are in check so we don't gain excess body fat and get unhealthy from that, because that's a bigger determining factor of overall health. So we know it's important, and now we know that maintenance calories are one of the biggest and most, it's kind of like the key cornerstone before we get into this. We need to know this before we set anything. How do we set this? The most accurate way of setting this takes some patience. You need 2 full weeks, if not at least 1. When a client starts with us, we require a minimum of 5 days tracking in MyFitnessPal or Macros Plus, whatever app they want to use, before we can get started. Not only does this create self-awareness and it kind of gives them some open-minded attitude towards what macros are, what foods they're consuming, and teaches them a little bit more about their personal intake, but it also gives us their average intake. So after 2 full weeks of tracking, or even just 1, we're gonna weigh ourselves every single day, and we're gonna track our calories every single day. What we find with our average is our maintenance calories. So after 1 to 2 weeks, if you maintained an average weight of 160 pounds and you consumed an average intake of 2,000 calories, your maintenance calories are 2,000 and your maintenance weight is 160. We can't judge this based off a couple days because intakes fluctuate and fluctuations in our weight go up and down constantly depending on stress, for menstrual cycles, training, cortisol, intakes are going up and down, salt, water, so many different factors influence our weight fluctuations across the week. So we need at least a week, if not 2 ideally, to see what these 2 things are doing and correlate them together, and then just find our average. This is gonna be the most accurate way to do it. The cool thing about this is it's more honest, because the second way to do this is the calculation method. This is just one calculation I'm gonna go over today, but there's many calculations. The Harris-Benedict, you can do the simple body weight times 12 and gives you a fat loss amount, times 14 to 15 gives you an average maintenance amount, and then times 16 to 18 gives you a weight gain amount. Very, very generic, but sometimes accurate. But there's multiple different methods and calculations. This one I'm gonna use is very simple. It just kind of gives you your total daily energy expenditure, and this should technically be your maintenance calories. 160, your body weight, so let's say we're using the example of 160 pounds again, your body weight times 10, so that could be 160 times 10, which gives us 1,600 calories. We're then going to multiply that by activity multiplier. So the calculation is body weight times 10 times activity multiplier. I put 1.55 for the activity multiplier because it's dead center of the scale. I'll link some stuff in the show notes of this podcast and the video so you can get some different averages and different intakes that you can use the activity multiplier and get the actual numbers. But what I've noticed in my experience of 8 years of coaching is that 1.55 is almost guaranteed to be anybody who is in the gym training and has a normal job. So unless you're doing something like you're a roofer and you're in the gym bodybuilding 6 days a week, this is an average intake or average multiplier. So for somebody like myself, I train 6 days a week. Most of my job I'm sitting behind a computer, but I get up and walk here and there. I try to stand up more if I can. But I have an average step count, I have an average NEAT, I have a very average sedentary lifestyle on top of hard training. I'm gonna fall in that 1.55 category, and this is what I use for the majority of our clients, would be this. It matches up with most of them. This equation, 160 times 10 equals 1,600 times 1.55, which is the activity multiplier, gives us 2,480 calories. This is our quote unquote maintenance. This is our total daily energy expenditure. We would create a deficit or a surplus depending on which goal we have based on that. The problem with this is if we use the example I used before with the 2 weeks of average tracking that told us 2,000 calories was actually our maintenance to hold 160, I'm under the assumption that I should be consuming more calories for my maintenance. And although 2,480 calories might be better, might be more realistic, might be more advantageous, because the more calories you can consume and maintain your weight, the better, it's not accurate. It's not what my true body weight is being maintained on, which we found out using the averages. So my point being with this is using 2 weeks of tracking, weighing in, and finding your average is gonna be much more realistic than using a calculation. A calculation will give you an ideal setup, an ideal world, where you should probably be, assuming hormones, metabolism, and stress is all in check. But the reality is that's not always the case. So, therefore, we would create a deficit off of this if we're losing fat. So now we have our maintenance. We can choose either one of these categories. And sometimes what I like to do is actually do both of these. We'll take the average weight and we'll do a calculation. And now I can see if there's a difference. If we did the average weigh-in and it gave us 2,000 calories and then I did the calculation and it gave me almost 2,500, I know this person is probably under eating and it's gonna be leery to dive them into a big deficit. That kind of gives you a reason to slow fat loss down, a reason to consider trying to create a new hormonal or metabolic set point before diving into a fat loss phase. Hey, let's focus on recovery. Let's focus on muscle. Let's focus on some habits and consistency before we dive into a deficit. Because based on what I see that you're under consuming calories a little bit. This kind of gives you the awareness for that. The other thing that I kind of wrote a side note on here with is, can you lose on maintenance calories? And that's a question I get a lot. And this is where it kind of plays in. If we did both of these calculations, and I see somebody is maintaining their body weight of 160 pounds on 2,000 calories, yet the calculation told me they should be maintaining their weight on 2,480 calories, I'm going to look at their macros, which are the next video, but I want to give you some insight in on this because this is something we use in our coaching practice. If I know that they're under consuming calories by 480, yet maintaining their weight, but they're under consuming protein by almost 480 calories, I'm absolutely gonna bump their calories up from 2,000 to 2,480 via protein. So that might be doubling their protein, but let's say we wanna get their protein up to body weight in grams, and that gives me a 400 to 500 calorie increase. I'm okay with that because protein is gonna be utilized. You might have a couple pounds up the first few days, maybe a week, because of food bulk in your body and just bloat, but protein is gonna be utilized. and is not going to be stored as fat. It's very, very hard to store protein as body fat. And some studies actually showed people consuming 2 times their body weight for up to 2 years and not gaining any extra body fat from it, on top of the other calories they were consuming from the other group. That's pretty shocking, and I don't advise anybody to consume 2 times their body weight, but the point being is that if you consume your body weight in protein, I can almost guarantee you're not going to store any fat from it. So we might be able to lose calories on maintenance, or lose fat on maintenance calories if we're under consuming via protein, or we're right at maintenance and we're under consuming protein. And in that situation, maybe we did their average intake and we did a calculation, and they both say about 2,500 calories, 2,480. Let's say that's the case, but they're under consuming protein significantly. I might lower carbs, lower fat, increase protein, and keep calories the exact same as their original maintenance calories, and I will absolutely see fat loss because the caloric breakdown is going to be different. The composition of what those calories are made up of is different now because protein is higher, carbs and fats are lower. Usually that leads to healthier eating habits as well. So there are some scenarios where we can lose on maintenance calories. Otherwise, in all other situations, we move on to the next step. We have our maintenance calories now, whether we used either one of those equations. Now we need to decide our rate of weight loss, and we need to create a caloric deficit to achieve that. In general, my recommendation for rate of fat loss, rate of weight loss is going to be 0.5 to 1% of body weight per week. Very simple, and it scales. So the heavier you are, the more weight you're able to lose per week safely. And it makes sense. The more fat I have, the more I can lose quickly without sacrificing metabolism or muscle mass. The leaner I am, the lighter I am, the less fat I had to lose. Therefore, the amount is going to drop per week is going to be less. Therefore, my metabolism and everything is going to be safe still. So it's kind of a good scale, but people need to remember this because if we start with 50 pounds to lose, and we do these calculations and we do a deficit and we're losing 0.5 to 1% body weight per week, we might be losing 2 to 3 pounds per week if we have a lot to lose. But if we make a 30 to 50 pound transformation, be ready to start losing a half a pound to a pound a week and being okay with it. And knowing that that progress is actually the exact same and just as good as 2 to 3 pounds per week once upon a time. Very, very important, and that's why I love the 0.5 to 1%. And I would say if you're more focused on getting shredded or you're more focused on performance maintenance, muscle maintenance, lean on the lower side. Go closer to 0.5% body weight loss per week if you are more focused on maintaining muscle, because I think you're just going to be safer that way. It might take longer to get to your goal, but again, the sustainable path is usually the better path when it comes to longevity. How big of a diet or deficit do we create? This is the last part of this video and podcast. How hard should we go on the diet? We have our maintenance. We know what we need to lose per week, so we know how to track using all the adherence tools we gave you in episode 1. We know exactly what things should look like week to week in order to be consistently moving towards the end goal. But we need to know how many calories to pull out of our current maintenance calories in order to achieve that weight loss. We can either be more casual with this or more aggressive with this. And I find in our coaching practice that this really is a individual factor around the person's motivation. Some people do not want to feel like shit. So they don't want to make an aggressive approach. And I understand. They'd rather spend 24 weeks dieting, get to their goal a little bit slower, but it's easier for them to sustain. It's not as hard of a hit week to week. They're not in such a fatigued dieting state. Other people get motivated by that fatigued dieting state when they are hungry, when they see visual progress happening faster, when they see the weight dropping faster. Those things motivate them, and they're okay with the big deficit, eating less food in order to get there. So I think the decision between casual and aggressive, number 1, depends on your personal motivation. It's individual. Number 2, it depends on your dieting history. And again, if you have a poor dieting history, if you've been through a lot of crash diets, if you have any hormonal issues, I highly recommend you apply for coaching. Again, the link is in the description, because in those states, going too aggressive can just put you back in that vicious cycle of losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight. And doing that toggle between weight gain and weight loss is not healthy for your metabolism. It's not healthy for your hormones, and you're going to put yourself back in that pit. So if your dieting history is great, if you've done successful, sustainable diets, if you've lost weight, had maintenance phases, you've done diet breaks, you've done things the right way, you have a lot of muscle mass, so on and so forth, you can get away with being more aggressive. You just need to make sure that you're periodizing more diet breaks and refeeds into there. The more aggressive you are on this scale, the more frequently you need to have maintenance phases plugged into your calorie intake, either weekly or monthly. I usually recommend people doing it every 4th or 5th week, or having a couple days every week back to back that you refeed. We're gonna talk about that in the periodization video, so make sure you stay tuned for that and you wait for that podcast and that video to air. But the point being is, the more aggressive we are, the more times we need to pull back and take a break from it, because it's harder on our body, it's harder on our metabolism, it's harder on our hormones, and it's harder on our psychology. It's mentally draining to diet that hard. If we are okay with a more conservative approach, we're okay taking a little bit longer to get there, and we're okay with slower progress per week, a casual, smaller percentage, a 5% drop in your calories is better. 20% is very aggressive. 20% would be like the Matador study. Every other week you're taking a diet break. Every 3 weeks you're taking a diet break. Very frequently you're increasing calories to give your body a break. 5% would be a very casual weight loss. You could go 12 weeks without taking a diet break or a refeed if you're doing a 5% caloric deficit, because it's not that draining on your body. It's not that physically and physiology taxing. It's not gonna harm your hormones, your metabolism very much. It's also not gonna strip body fat, or muscle mass very much. It's an easy, progressive, slow approach. And I actually do recommend that for most people. But the point is we kind of have this scale. Are we a casual dieter, or are we an aggressive dieter? What you're gonna do is take 5 to 20% of that maintenance calories and just pull them. You can do this from carbs or fats, and we're gonna talk about that in the next video when we dive into macros. But the point being is that we're taking 5 to 20% of our calories away, and we're not doing it from protein. We're doing it from carbs or fat. And that's gonna be a tool for adherence. If you're really focused on performance and muscle mass, and you have plenty of fat to facilitate proper hormonal balance, which again we'll touch on in the next video, pull from fat. You can pull from fat, leave your carbs high, and you'll have more muscle mass, you have better performance for the long term. If you barely have, or if you have plenty of carbs and you would rather pull from carbs because you can adhere better if you have more fat in your diet, pull from carbs. It really is a toggle game of adherence and what you're gonna do best with. So, wrapping up this video, this is a lot of information, guys. I understand that this goes really deep, and to be honest with you, I can take this any one way. Every individual that approaches us, we're probably gonna go a different route. We're gonna implement different strategies, and we're gonna have a different mindset behind what we decide to do with them. But the big thing I want you to take away from this is that calories are one of the most important things on this pyramid. They're gonna be the biggest influence of body composition, performance, and health. We need to find our maintenance before we can do anything, and then our deficit is going to be based on our adherence level and our goals, and how frequently we're able to take diet breaks or refeeds, basically maintenance phases. And just one last tip for you guys to take away from this is, it's okay to take 5% off and just see what your body does. Some people work better with aggressive approaches, even if they don't want to take an aggressive approach. I know many clients who will pull 5% of their calories out to see fat loss, nothing happens. They just have a stubborn, resilient body. So sometimes the best thing to do is take the minimal effective dose. Take 5% of your calories out. See what happens over the next 2 to 3 weeks. If nothing at all happens, that just means you need to be a little bit more aggressive. You could take another small chunk and make it 7.5% instead of 5%, or you can say, screw it, I'm gonna get more aggressive, I'm gonna take 15%, and I'm gonna take a diet break in a couple weeks. You kind of have to play with these things, you kind of have to test these things, and unless you are a coach, it can be hard to see the signals or the signs the body gives, a client's body gives, in order to know which route is gonna be right, because it changes all the time. So, wrapping up, guys, as a whole, calories are gonna be one of the most important things. This is our foundation, this is our blueprint, this is the roadmap of how you can create a deficit and start seeing success in your fat loss via nutrition with calories.